Hi guys, I have prepared a PowerPoint presentation for you for MGT 704 Financial Management. This is on CLO4 Working Capital and Current Asset Management. This would be a full-blown video wherein you could just do a review in case you've missed out classes. But I would suggest still that you attend classes, and then this would be a refresher. Okay? So we'll start with our course learning outcome. CLO4 would be talking about working capital and current asset management. Take note, this is part of your final exams. And there would be a couple of ranges. The first range would be 4.1. Examine the nature and growth of asset growth and patterns of financing, such as alternate plans, long-term financing, and short-term financing. So we'll be talking about what are your sources of financing here, short-term and long-term, and how do we know that there's an asset growth. Second learning outcome would be examine the term structure of interest rates and its impact on financial decisions. Actually, this is a quite easy topic because we just need to know definitions and then how you understand them in terms of applications, but no calculations required. 4.3, examine the cash flow cycle, collections, and disbursements. So we'll be having a little bit of a discussion on calculations here. 4.4, examine different sources of short-term financing available to organizations and financial managers. Actually, 7.4 here is much related to your 4.1. 4.4 here is related to your 4.1 because we're talking of financing. And then 4.5, examine how companies manage accounts receivables, including credit policy administration. So there will be a little bit also of calculations. Okay, so let's start with our first topic. So since CLO4 talks about working capital, we first have to know what the working capital is. So it says here, working capital is a measure of both a company's efficiency and its short-term financial health. So when we talk about financial health, again, we just need to know whether the company is able to make use of its assets, maximize its assets, and at the same time look whether their financial liabilities or their long-term liabilities are being met. So that's how strong your company will be in terms of financial health. Working capital also indicates whether a company has enough short-term assets to cover its short-term debts. So this is what I was talking about earlier. You have to know whether you have maximized your assets so that you'd be able to pay off your liabilities. But this would be short-term in that sense. So how do we calculate for working capital? So working capital is calculated as working capital is equal to current assets minus current liabilities. Again, what are current assets? So when you say current assets, they're found in the balance sheet. Okay, so when you look at a balance sheet template, you will have some samples like cash equivalents, accounts receivables, inventories, marketable securities, prepaid expenses, and other liquid assets. So when you say liquid, something that you can easily convert to cash. Cash and cash equivalents, you know that for a fact that this would be your cash in banks, anything that you have cash in the organization. Accounts receivables, definitely this would be your expected money to be received in the future. Okay. Inventories, these are your stocks that are not yet sold. Marketable securities, if you would like to see that, try to determine stocks which are sold, okay? But we will have more discussions on this in class. And then prepaid expenses. So when you say prepaid, definitely you try to get the service you pay first before you're getting the service. Okay, so we'll have more discussions on this, but again, we have identified these items or these terms in CLO1. So it's just a review. Now, since we know what current assets are, CLO4 would like to determine and would like to let us know how we manage them. So when you talk of management, okay, so from the word management alone, we have PLOC. So what's PLOC? We have planning, we have always organizing, L is leading, and C is controlling. So we talk about management here, which is PLOC. So you properly plan your current assets, you organize them, where you're going to use them. Leading, meaning you have to identify and be the person to put in application where you are allocating your current assets. Then you have to control, so you have to monitor whether you're going beyond or you're going less to whatever your goals will be. So when you do current asset management, this involves management of cash, marketable securities, accounts receivables, and inventories. Now, in the ranges, so we have 4 ranges here in the CLO. So we will be combining 4.1 and 4.4. So it says there, ways to finance your business. So when we're talking here of financing, for the meantime, we look into one part of financing, which is your short-term financing. Okay? So what's this? Finding financing in any economic climate can be challenging, whether you're looking for startup funds, capital to expand, or money to hold on through the tough times. So why do we borrow? Definitely number one, if you want to start a business, sometimes you want to go and borrow for short term if it's possible, if it's not too big. It's not like you borrow the whole amount, but you would be getting a little portion for a little startup. Expansion. Okay, so you want to buy machineries, maybe looking into physical expansion, looking for another factory to put your business. And then tough times. Tough times can be economic situations. Remember your pestle analysis in your MGT 701. So this may be a political issue, it can be an economic issue, legal issues sometimes. So any tough times which are uncontrollable by the firm. So there are additional notes here on short-term financing, so just have a look. So it's also written there. In general, these are bank loans. Okay, so your short-term financing can be taken from loans. Okay, so it can be, but since it's short-term, we'll just emphasize that it is less than a year. So I won't be reading through what you have here in the slide, so you can just read through that, but my explanations, you just have to listen to it. Credit cards. Okay, so it's an easy purchase. So whoever uses credit cards here, you're given an annual charge. You just swipe your credit cards, and then from there you can already purchase. But definitely the bank will not credit it right away to the company that you have bought goods. Okay, and it would be deducted soon on the part of the purchaser. So that could be a short-term credit. Raise money from your family and friends. So definitely, friends, families can be sources of short-term funds as long as you know to pay them back. Okay, and then you should know also that you have to keep your word. Okay, keep your promise. So when you say you'll be paying them after a certain period, make sure that you have to pay them in a prescribed period. Microloans. I think you have microloans here all around New Zealand. So they're not banks, okay? They're not banks, but they're individual private institutions who gives easy loans to people. Some examples that you see here would be iFinance, Dollar Dealer sometimes, okay? It looks like for a microloan, you can borrow, okay? But there are some wherein you have to exchange it with something. Like when I said dollar dealer, you've got an item, okay, and then from that item they try to give you something in return in the value of that item. And then if, for example, people would want to buy your product, would like to buy the good that you have exchanged for a loan, and you're not able to pay them back, so when they sell it, so that's how they get their income. Okay. Now, what then would be short-term financing? So it can finance and obtain, and it can be obtained for at least a year or less than a year. So term is normally 6 to 24 months. Okay. Business may require short-term financing to use as working capital. So what we said was making available funds for your business, day-to-day operations of the company. So that's your working capital. 2, immediate responses to payments to suppliers, purchases of equipments, pay utilities. You can also use that as emergencies. And then the cash flow may not always be sufficient at the time that you need it. So most of you will have to look for alternative sources. So your short-term financing can be a good source. So liabilities, 1, we have done short-term, now we'll do long-term. So when we have long-term, definitely we know that it's over a year. Okay, so all liabilities for over a year would be considered long-term. This would be for big projects. So it would be your PPE, property, plant, and equipment purchases, maybe a land or anything that is of big amounts, that you cannot pay it in just one time. Now, we're done with 4.1 topic. We go for 4.2. 4.2 will be talking about stocks and bonds. Okay, so we'll just have a little distinction between a stock and a bond. So when you say stocks, these are evidences of ownership, so something that you own. Okay, and then bonds are evidences of indebtedness, so these are your liabilities. So this stocks and bonds are part of your balance sheet, but this would be more of the second right side formula. So remember, you have your assets is equal to liabilities plus capital. So this would be your liabilities, which are your bonds, okay, and your equity would be your shares of stocks. Now, I want you to look into a sample of a bond certificate and a stock certificate. So you will see a little bit of a similarity, but since it is a bond, there would be series of it because of the long term. Okay. Part of 4.2 is term structure and yield curve. Now, since we talked about bonds earlier, definitely when there's a bond, there is an evidence of indebtedness. You have to pay back a certain amount of interest. So the term structure of interest rates is also known as a yield curve, and it plays a central role in the economy. Why is this? Because it reflects the changes in interest rates. Okay, so this interest rates would be definitely the add-on amount on your bond, or the principal amount that you will you want to borrow. So assuming you want to borrow $10,000, or it's too small for a month, let's say $100,000. Then you wanted to pay that for maybe 3 years, so it becomes long term. So the interest there is called your term structure. Okay, it's also called as a yield curve because it is a curve showing several interest rates across different contract length for a similar debt contract. So meaning here, for one term, you would show how much is interest, and then another second term, how much is the interest, and then a third term, how much is interest. So actually, when you see the word yield curve, it's also known as yield to maturity. So it's also a rate. So if I would be asking you, and later on you try to answer, what's the difference between a term structure and a yield curve? So I want to, I'll throw that question to you and try to answer that in class. Still part of 4.2, since we talked about bond